The room went completely silent the moment the young woman lowered herself into the chair that had always belonged to the wife. She smiled as though she had already won, smoothing the sleeve of her expensive cream dress while dozens of guests watched from around the long dining table. Across the room, the wife stood frozen beside the doorway, holding a small gift she had brought for the family celebration. Her husband looked down at his plate, pretending not to notice the humiliation unfolding before him. Then, just as the woman reached for her glass, an elderly voice thundered across the bright afternoon dining room. "Get up!" Everyone turned. Grandma Odette was standing at the head of the table, her hands trembling against the polished wooden chair, but her eyes were sharper than anyone had seen them in years. The young woman slowly looked up. Grandma pointed directly at the seat. "That chair is not yours. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of doing the right thing even when nobody is watching, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Wisdom Story House. Your support helps us bring more stories of courage, family, and hope." The woman sitting in the chair was named Marisol Vane, a confident 31-year-old who had entered the family's world only months earlier. She was elegant, charming, and always perfectly dressed, and she had quickly learned how to make people feel important when she wanted something from them. She was also secretly involved with Grant Mercer, the eldest grandson of Grandma Odette and the husband of the woman standing by the doorway. Grant's wife, Celeste, had been married to him for 8 years. She had supported him when his business was nothing more than a rented office, an old laptop, and a dream. She had worked extra hours, sold jewelry to help cover bills, and stood beside him through every failure before his company finally became successful. But success had changed Grant. Slowly, the man who once thanked Celeste for every sacrifice began treating her as though she were an inconvenience. He stayed late at the office, stopped answering her calls, and became strangely defensive whenever she asked where he had been. Celeste had suspected there was another woman, but suspicion was different from proof. She kept hoping she was wrong because admitting the truth meant admitting that the man she had built a life with no longer respected the life they had built together. She had also remained close to Grandma Odette, who had always treated her like family. Odette knew Celeste's heart better than Grant ever had. She remembered the nights Celeste had sat beside her hospital bed when everyone else had gone home. She remembered Celeste bringing homemade soup when Odette was recovering from surgery, fixing the curtains in her bedroom, and listening patiently to stories she had heard 100 times before. To Odette, Celeste was not simply Grant's wife. She was the granddaughter of her heart. That afternoon was supposed to be a family anniversary celebration at Odette's countryside home. The house was bright with daylight, its large windows open toward the garden, where white flowers moved gently in the warm breeze. Relatives had arrived from different cities, carrying gifts and trays of food. Celeste had spent the morning preparing a special dessert because she wanted the gathering to feel peaceful. She had no idea that Grant had invited Marisol. When Celeste arrived, she saw Marisol immediately. The woman stood beside Grant near the garden doors, laughing softly while he leaned toward her. Celeste felt something inside her collapse, but she refused to create a scene. She walked inside, placed her gift on the table, and greeted everyone with a quiet smile. Then came the moment that changed everything. As the family prepared to sit down, Marisol walked directly to Celeste's usual place beside Grandma Odette and sat there without hesitation. Celeste stopped walking. For 8 years, that seat had been hers. It was not merely a chair. It represented her place in the family. It was where she had sat beside Odette during birthdays, holidays, difficult conversations, and joyful celebrations. Everyone knew it. Even Grant knew it, but he said nothing. Instead, he pulled out another chair for himself and sat beside Marisol. Celeste felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to leave, but she could hear her own mother's old advice in her mind: never make a permanent decision while your heart is breaking. So she stood quietly near the doorway, trying to control her breathing. Then Grandma Odette saw her. The elderly woman looked from Celeste to Marisol, then to Grant. Her expression changed completely. The warmth disappeared from her face, replaced by a sternness that made several relatives lower their eyes. "Get up," she said. Marisol blinked. Odette repeated herself louder. "Get up." The room became so quiet that the ticking of the wall clock could be heard. Marisol slowly stood. Odette walked toward the chair. Her steps were slow, but every person in the room watched her. She touched the back of the chair and then looked at Celeste. "That seat was saved for someone who earned it," she said. Celeste's eyes filled with tears. Grant finally spoke, trying to calm the situation, but Odette raised one hand. She did not need to shout anymore. Her authority was enough. She asked Grant whether he had invited Marisol there. He admitted that he had. Then Odette asked the question nobody expected, whether Celeste knew who Marisol really was. Grant remained silent. That silence told the entire story. Celeste closed her eyes for a moment. The truth she had feared had finally arrived. Marisol looked embarrassed, but she quickly tried to defend herself. She insisted that she and Grant cared about each other and that Celeste's marriage was already falling apart. She claimed she had not intended to hurt anyone. Odette listened patiently. Then she asked Marisol one simple question. If you believed their marriage was over, why did you need to sit in her chair before she had even left the house? Marisol had no answer. Those words struck harder than an accusation. Odette then turned to Grant and reminded him of the woman standing across the room. She reminded him that Celeste had been beside him when his business was failing. She reminded him that when his father died, Celeste had spent weeks helping the family while Grant struggled to cope. She reminded him that Celeste had never demanded credit for the sacrifices she made. Grant lowered his head. For the first time that day, Celeste stopped hoping he would defend her. Something inside her had changed. She realized she did not need him to explain her worth. The people who mattered already knew it. Odette walked to Celeste and took her hand. Then she led her toward the chair. Sit down, she said gently. Celeste hesitated. Odette smiled. You have spent 8 years making room for everyone else. Today, you will take your place. Celeste sat. The room remained silent, but this time, the silence did not feel humiliating. It felt like justice. After lunch, Grant followed Celeste into the garden. He apologized. He said he had made mistakes. He claimed that his relationship with Marisol had become complicated and that he had been confused. Celeste listened. Then she told him something that surprised even herself. She said she was no longer interested in excuses. She had spent too many years believing that love meant tolerating disrespect. She now understood that love without loyalty becomes loneliness shared by two people. Grant begged her to give him another chance. Celeste looked through the garden window at Grandma Odette, who was watching them from inside. She told Grant that forgiveness and reconciliation were not the same thing. She could forgive him someday. But she could not return to the life they had before. Grant's face fell. Celeste removed her wedding ring and placed it in his palm. I gave you my trust, she said quietly. You decided it was worth risking. I will not spend the rest of my life proving that I deserved better. Then she walked away. Months passed. Celeste moved into a small apartment near her workplace and began rebuilding her life. At first, everything felt unfamiliar. There were mornings when she woke up expecting Grant to be beside her. There were evenings when the silence of the apartment felt enormous. But slowly, she rediscovered pieces of herself she had forgotten. She started painting again, something she had loved before marriage. She took weekend trips. She reconnected with old friends. Most importantly, she stopped measuring her worth through someone else's approval. Grandma Odette visited her often. One afternoon, Celeste brought Odette a small framed painting of the family dining room. In the painting was the famous chair. Odette laughed when she saw it. Celeste told her the chair had become a reminder of something important. A person should never have to beg for a seat at a table where they have spent years giving everything they have. Odette held Celeste's hand and told her that sometimes losing a place in someone's life was how a person discovered their rightful place in their own. Grant eventually ended his relationship with Marisol. Not because Celeste returned, but because he finally understood what he had destroyed. He began therapy, repaired relationships with members of his family, and slowly learned to accept responsibility without demanding forgiveness. Years later, when Grandma Odette celebrated her 90th birthday, the entire family gathered again in the same dining room. Celeste arrived wearing a simple blue dress. There was no husband beside her. There was no ring on her finger. But there was something different in her eyes. Peace. Odette stood beside the familiar chair and smiled. This time, Celeste did not hesitate before sitting down. She belonged there, not because she was someone's wife. Not because she had earned someone's approval. But because she had shown kindness, loyalty, courage, and love when it mattered. And sometimes, that is the greatest lesson a family can learn. The person who gets pushed away is not always the person who loses. Sometimes, they are the person who finally discovers that they never needed to fight for a place at a table that truly valued them. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who may need to hear this message, and leave a comment. Sometimes one small act of support can remind another person that they are not alone. Special request. Before you leave, comment, I will always choose self-respect. if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Because in the end, Grandma Odette was right. A chair is only a chair. But when someone tries to take the place where your love, loyalty, and sacrifices belong, sometimes you have to stand up, not to fight for the chair, but to remind yourself that you deserve a seat at a table where you are truly respected.